Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. In our second hour, we have something different for you. It's National Suicide Awareness Week. And we're going to be joined by Kevin Hines just a bit later, who I met when I was at NBC. He came on my show. He literally jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. You may have heard about him and lived to tell about it. And he has spent the rest of his life trying to stop others from making the same kind of decision he made. Well, something special happened between us that day, and even Kevin doesn't know about it, but we're going to get into it in our second hour, and I hope you will stay tuned for that. First, though, a lot of news to get to today, more developments and reaction to the heinous murder of an innocent young Ukrainian woman caught on camera in Charlotte. The caught on camera part, that's the problem. That's problematic, if you ask Axios. Plus, a, quote, non-binary journalist cannot explain to Piers Morgan what non-binary means. It's an amazing clip. I love Piers. This is the clip of the day. He completely exposed this person just by asking that simple question. And then he was like a dog with a bone in asking it once he realized she couldn't answer it. It's amazing how these leftists throw out these terms or even adopt them and claim them as their own identity without being able to even define them. All right, so we'll get to that in a minute. But joining me now to react to this and more is Andrew Klavan. He's host of The Andrew Klavan Show and author of the novel, After That, The Dark, which is available for pre-order now, hitting bookstores on October 28th. Andrew's also going to be joining us for Megyn Kelly Live, along with his Daily Wire colleagues when our show hits the road this fall. If you missed the announcement yesterday, we're taking the Megyn Kelly Show on tour, going to 10 different cities. That show with Andrew will be November 6th in Jacksonville, Florida. You can find out more info and get tickets right now at megynkelly.com. Get your tickets before they all sell out, megynkelly.com. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and follow me on Insta, Facebook, and X. I've been talking a lot about Riverbend Ranch lately because their steaks are amazing. Riverbend Ranch has taken Black Angus beef to a whole new level. For the last 35 years, Riverbend Ranch has been creating a very elite Angus herd by using ultrasound to select genetically superior cattle with a focus on flavor and tenderness. When you purchase from Riverbend Ranch, you are not only supporting the 64 cowboys and cowgirls and their families who work on that ranch, but you're also supporting over 260 other U.S. ranches and the hundreds of American families who work on them. It is born in the USA, raised in the USA, and processed in the USA. It's aged to perfection for 21 days and shipped directly from the ranch to your home. This is not your average Black Angus beef. So order from riverbendranch.com. Use the promo code Megyn, and that'll get you $20 off your first order. And let me know what you think. riverbendranch.com, promo code Megyn. Andrew, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. All right, so this story out of Charlotte, North Carolina, grows. It grows only because the mainstream media has been dragged, kicking and screaming over to covering it. You know, only because of shows like yours and mine were they forced to acknowledge this young, beautiful, innocent, white, blonde, beautiful Ukrainian woman was killed, stabbed to death out of nowhere by a black man from Charlotte, North Carolina, who seems deeply disturbed in multiple ways and had been, as they say, a sophisticated consumer of the criminal justice system prior to plunging his pocket knife into poor Irina's neck on a train, on a public train. An extraordinary display on CNN last night on that Abby Phillips show discussing this story. And she had on, among others, my pal Arthur Aidala was there. She had on Van Jones, and Van Jones is completely gone. I mean, his take on this story is insane, and he knows better. He knows better. He didn't do his homework, I'm going to guess, but where they took this commentary was deeply ignorant and, of course, insulting, and played the race card against the people who are saying, hey, this would be very different if the races were reversed of the perp and the victim. First, I want to update the audience from this point yesterday on the murderer accused, DeCarlos Brown, who on this train, after he plunged the knife into Irina, got up and walked down a couple train cars, and then off the train. And as he had the knife, as he was dripping blood, and now we have heard, and we heard this yesterday prior to that CNN show late last night, the audio of what he says. Listen carefully. We've listened to it many times. We've sped it up. We've slowed it down. We've turned up the volume. And what he is saying is, I got that white girl. I got that white girl. Here it is. So very disturbing. He's disturbed and obviously is mentioning race. By the way, on that front, we have a belief, a well-founded belief, that the FBI may be stepping into this case with an announcement shortly. So stay tuned for that. It could happen during this show. All right. So with all that buildup, I'm going to take you to Abby Phillip's show. And here's Abby Phillip, who never misses an opportunity to make her segments or her show about race and how oppressed Black people, like Abby Phillip, who makes millions of dollars, presumably, are. Here she is in SOP 3.
Certain people have been looking for an opportunity to find a case like this, to make a point like this. I want to play, this is Charlie Kirk, why he says this hasn't gotten a lot of attention.
A white Ukrainian refugee was murdered just because she was white. Everybody knows that, obviously. If a random white person simply walked up to and stabbed a nice, law-abiding Black person for no reason, it would be an apocalyptically huge national story used to impose national sweeping political changes on the whole country. Instead, Megan Basham, no one seems to care when a white woman gets stabbed to the death.
Wow. He said white a lot.
They've been looking for opportunities to make this some sort of like reciprocal George Floyd situation. And that's the part that I think he's almost giving away the game. And it's sad to see a lot of people going along with it.
It's sad. She's sad. She's super sad. And here's the follow-up. Hold your thought from Van Jones in SOP 4.
We don't know why that man did what he did. And for Charlie Kirk to say, we know he did it because she's white, when there's no evidence of that, it's just pure race mongering, hate mongering. It's wrong. Then he says that if something like that had happened the other way, there would be sweeping changes imposed on society. Where is the George Floyd Policing Act? It didn't pass. You mentioned the thing about cashless bail. I think this is a big challenge that we have. Would you have felt better if there had been cash bail and the mom had come and put down $1,000 to let him out? It's not about cashless bail or no cashless bail. It's about the fact that we don't know how to deal with people who are hurting in the way this man was hurting. Hurt people hurt people.
Oh, my God. Hurt people hurt people. That's okay. Just two quick things. The mom would have gotten him out of jail, like if there'd been like bail. We don't know that she wouldn't have gone down and bailed him out. Yes, we do, because the mom wanted him locked up. Van needs to do his homework. He did not do his homework before he went on that show, because I do not believe he wants to appear willfully ignorant. The mother was upset that the system continued turning her son back out into the community. She didn't know what to do with him and had run out of options. So I believe the mother would not have bailed him out had there been cash bail. And the business about where's the George Floyd policing, like nothing changed in this country after George Floyd, Andrew. Like we're just going to pretend that wasn't some watershed moment where the left lost its ever-loving mind and forced all of corporate America and sports America and educational America to bend the knee on this race essentialism, which has still infested virtually every area of our lives and how we live to this day. We're only starting to unravel it thanks to the Trump election this past November. Your thoughts on it all?
Well, I think this is a huge story. Leaving aside the details of the story itself, the story that I think is just basically is an example of our time and what this moment in time is about is the question of whether a news media that is corrupt to its core is going to continue to be allowed to distort the facts and distort the state of the country, or Have we finally amassed enough power in independent media to turn that story around? And what I mean by that is this. There are two kinds of news stories, essentially. There's a news story that's sensational. We're all interested if a beautiful blonde movie star gets killed by her famous athlete husband. That's a big story simply because we are made as human beings to pay attention to stories like that in the same way we're made to tell stories about kings in Shakespeare to represent something about the human race. We attach our identities to famous, beautiful people. That's just a human fact. That's not a very important story. It's just a sensational story and an appealing story. The other kind of story are stories that are examples indicative of what is going on. So if 50 people are slaughtered on a single night or shot in a single night in Chicago, that's an important news story because it indicates what's going on in Chicago and in cities that are run in a similar way to Chicago. This corrupt media has done everything it can to make the exception the rule and the rule the exception. To cover a George Floyd story, which is an anomalous story, a story of a man who died in police custody, maybe, we're not even sure of this, even though a court decided it was true, we're not sure that he died because of the actions of a police officer. We certainly can say that the police officer didn't act out of bigotry because he was never charged with a hate crime, so we know that was never an issue. But we have no idea why that happened, but it's a very rare thing that happens. What is not a rare thing is black people committing crime. And they don't commit crimes because they're black. The obsession with race is on the left. It's not on the right. What we're saying is cover everything as what it is. If you want to cover, the beautiful actress getting killed by the athlete, that's fine. But don't tell us that's the state of athletics and movie stars, because it's not. But if you're going to cover the story of a black man attacking a white person, that is a more likely scenario. And if you want to really cover murder, which is almost all male against male, and a lot of it, a very strong disproportion of it, black against black, then cover that, because that's going to tell you something about the state of the country. What the left does continually is it raises up the exception as the rule. And it does it because of hostility toward this country and because of what this country stands for, which is the sovereignty of the people, the government of ordinary people running elites. And what the media represents in their corruption is this sliver of elites who set opinions and tell us what we're supposed to think and do. You're absolutely right. George Floyd, it didn't change anything. It simply exploded a narrative that had been in the pipeline for decades up until that moment. And they seized upon it in a moment of crisis, the moment of the pandemic, and caused and encouraged riots, and then told us the riots weren't happening. And if they were happening, we deserved it. Moved to, defund the police, which of course is a horrible thing to do to the poor and to people living in tough black neighborhoods where they need the police more than anybody else. And to explain to us that we systemically are racist, which is a complete nonsense. We were the least, I've lived in different countries. This is the least racist country I have ever been in. It's not that human beings aren't racist, they are, but this is the least racist systemically country I've ever been in. And so what we are doing now is we have forced them to cover a story that would have been covered, we know for a fact, it would have been covered 0%. And we know that because until X and you and all of us started chiming in and saying, wait a minute, why isn't this a big story? Because it is both sensational and indicative. Why isn't it? We have forced them now to cover it in the kind of crazy way that CNN was covering it. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about race. We're talking about the fact that they are excluding this from the news because of race.
That's exactly right.
This is a story of human evil, and it's a story of the fact that there is a culture, there is a black culture that has been created by the left. It was encouraged by the left of fatherless children, of not being responsible, of cashless bail, which is a simply insane policy that has basically enculturated this kind of person to crime. And then they say, oh, we're not allowed to pay attention to that crime because they're black. It's not because they're black. It's because the left is the left, and the left has dominated black society, which also, Megyn, is a question of elites dictating to the poor. This is, for instance, when you talk about fatherless children, it is one thing for the New York Times to tell its people in Park Slope that wouldn't it be fun to to try a throuple? Wouldn't it be great to have a child out of wedlock? What do you need a father for? Wouldn't it be just as good if gay people adopted? Wouldn't it just be just as good if we got rid of the family? That's going to be fine if you have the money to pay for the rehab your fatherless child is going to end up in. If you don't have the money to pay for that rehab, and if you don't have the money to buy people off so they don't pay attention to his criminality and his bad behavior, your son is going to end up in prison. And then you're going to cry, oh, it's because of black people. It's not because of black people. It's because of leftist policies. You know, Malcolm Gladwell the other day came out and said that he had been cowed into saying that men could play in women's sports. I stopped reading Malcolm Gladwell many years ago now because he wrote a book about David and Goliath in which he said that putting people in prison was bad because it took males out of poor black neighborhoods so they had no male role models. And in fact, it increased crime. And I was reading that and I thought, except it didn't. Putting criminals in prison cut crime. The crime between now and the 80s, when leftist policies were in play, when leftist policies were dominant, it has plummeted because of Giuliani-style policing that does not make any excuses for anybody. Everybody who commits a crime has to go to jail. And that's the thing. When Gladwell said that, I thought, well, he's just not telling the truth. I'm sorry. He's the facts are facts, and the numbers show that putting people in prison, acting as if criminals are criminals, punishing criminals for the crimes they commit brings crime down. It gets the criminal off the street, and it tells the next guy maybe not to commit that crime if you don't want to wind up spending your life in a cell the size of an outhouse.
But that's so interesting because he's been known as like the data guy. He just takes you where the data goes. He does a study on like
never believed anything he said.
What are people doing with the hockey teams in terms of starting their sons in school at a certain date to make them older. And he goes back and does another study, data-driven study on it. So you kind of figured out early on maybe he's not fully data-driven, maybe he's agenda-driven. And that's the point from which he starts, which is basically what he admitted. I go back and forth on his admission from last week where he said, for the listening audience that didn't hear us play it a couple days ago, he admitted that he moderated a panel a couple years ago and that he intentionally misled on his own feelings when he suggested boys should be allowed to play in girls' sports if they say they're trans. And now he's saying that he hasn't turned since then. He hasn't like come to see the error of his ways, that he was actively lying about his opinion at the time in order to not be, ostracized by the crowd, to be loved. And I'm of two minds of it because on the one hand, it's different. I mean, like I've talked many times about some of the segments I did on NBC, which I deeply regret, but I did them like we had a bunch of so-called trans children, which is not a thing, on the show in a celebratory way. And we talked about not bullying and being loving and accepting. And I say to the audience, and I think my audience knows me at this point, that was done truly out of just kindness in my heart and a willingness to eradicate bullying of children. And without an understanding at the time of how we were all being manipulated and misled by activists who do not have the well-being of children at all in the forefront of their heads. So I see that as very different from what Malcolm Gladwell did. He lied. He was too cowardly to admit how he actually felt. And so I feel like, okay, so he does deserve some shaming because he was cowardly. Now he's saying it himself, though, which leads me to the second piece of mind on it, which is, shouldn't we encourage that? Like, who else is going to come out and admit the folly of their ways, even if the folly was making a terrible, dishonest choice, if we shame all the people who come out and admit that they did this crap?
Normally, I would agree with you. Normally, I would say if somebody comes out and says, I was a coward, I failed, I tried, because let's face it, that happens to everybody. And what the left does is when you apologize, they take it as blood in the water. You apologize and they destroy you. It's only the people who stand up to the left and spit in their eye, even when they're wrong, who survive the kind of shaming and canceling that the left brings about. So normally, I would say, yes, good for Malcolm Gladwell for admitting it. He failed. He had a moment of failure. The problem is that I've read a bunch of his books, and they're almost all like this. And he was actually part of the system that shamed him, that cowed him. He too accused people of racism when they disagreed. That was the system that he was in. So he basically got bit by his own alligator. And it's a little bit hard to feel sorry for him for that. It is one thing if a person comes out, maybe he's a comedian or whatever, and he says something stupid and then says, you know what, I got intimidated. I'm all for forgiveness there. I think you have to forgive people for failures, or else we're all in big trouble because we all fail. But he was part of that system, and a lot of what he did, and I always felt this about his books, a lot of what he did was, these lies, damn lies, and statistics. And even though he brought the statistics, just like Steven Pinker, a lot of those statistics did not say what he said they said. And so this to me is so important. I've been talking now for a long time about narrative, and we all use the word narrative, but it is a real thing. It is a real thing what the going narrative is. And the example I always use is George Washington, an absolute hero of liberty, holding slaves and not understanding why the slaves didn't work on his farm as hard as he did. He literally didn't understand it. That's how powerful narrative is. That is how it sweeps all of us away. I believe that that's true today of abortion. I believe women have abortions without understanding what it is they're doing. And that's why I don't think they should be penalized. I don't think necessarily transgender people should be penalized as much as the people who tell them there are such things as mothering persons or front holes or whatever it is they tell them. This is induced mental illness, chest feeding. This is induced mental illness. In the case of black people, I think their culture has been gutted by the left. I think it's been sexually gutted. I think it's been societally gutted. I think the fact that when somebody, dresses like a punk and a thug, we don't say, hey, there's a way we dress in our society that telegraphs. It's a language. It telegraphs to each other that we're decent people. Megyn, when I used to have to go to work at 3 a.m. because I was working in news, I used to actually reroute myself sometimes around a disco where I knew there'd be people out in the middle of the morning. And it happened to be a black disco, but it was a black disco for people who had money. And it was, you'd see good-looking guys, well-dressed with good-looking women. You knew they weren't going to mug you. And not only that, I knew that if I was mugged, they would come to my help. They would come to my aid. It's not about race. It's so much about culture. And I think because the left has polluted a race with a bad culture, they can mix those things up. But it's them who did it. It's not us.
Totally agree. For the listening audience, we did pull over the Gladwell sound just so you don't stay confused. If you are, here's the clip we've been discussing.
If we did a replay of that exact panel at the Sloan Conference this coming March, it runs in exactly the opposite direction. And it would be, I suspect, near unanimity in the room that trans athletes have no place in the female category. I don't think there's any question. I just think it was a strange, the reason I'm ashamed of my performance at that panel, because I share your position 100%, and I was cowed.
I will say to your point, I saw a long piece by Douglas Murray who's debated Gladwell, and he did not have a lot of charity for Gladwell. He said a lot of what you just said, suggesting that Gladwell is a dishonest debater and had, wrongfully turned alleged facts against Murray about things he had said, which he hadn't, and so on. Like, he also had absolutely no quarter for him. And there was somebody else online who I follow on Twitter, I'm trying to remember who it was, who had a similar reaction. So the people I follow have it was Matt Taibbi, who uniformly were like, no, apology not accepted, because they don't believe he's coming in good faith. I don't know Gladwell very well. He's been on the show, but this is something I'd love to discuss with him. And I'd raise those other issues too, just to see what he has to say. Maybe we will ask him on. Okay, back to the story in North Carolina. And hat tip to Andy No, who that's the person from whom I learned that this perpetrator was walking on the train saying, I got that white girl, got that white girl. I'm going to guess Brian Stelter and Van Jones may stupidly not follow Andy, which is really dumb because he's one of the best ex-follows you can find. He's been on the show before. And here is Brian Stelter with his take on what's really going on here, not on that late night show, but on a different segment on CNN yesterday. SOT 2.
really over the weekend, Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, other Trump-aligned figures succeeded in making this senseless death a symbol of big city crime. We heard President Trump asked about it yesterday when he was heading home from New York City. He didn't seem to know much about it. He said he would get briefed, and then today Trump did know all about it. That's exactly what has happened here. This story has trickled up from local news to social media and now to the president's attention, and it's being used, as you said, Brianna, as a political symbol, with MAGA media calling for more forceful punishments and more incarceration. I have to say, some of the replies to Musk, some of the comments around this story are baldly racist, stoking fear of African Americans because this man attacked a white woman. The open racism on sites like X today, it's eye-popping. But there are also legitimate questions about this so-called career criminal, someone who had been a repeat offender. And those questions, I hope they're not lost amid all of the cesspool kind of comments on social media.
All right, first of all, Andrew, it's a lie, okay? We went back and looked at Elon's post and just actually started looking at the comments just to see, is it a cesspool of racist comments? It wasn't, not at all. Most of them had stats about black on white crime. That's what dominated the comments by Elon's followers. So I'm not exactly sure what Stelter is referring to, but he may be employing a trick that the left loves to employ. And I mean it. Everybody from Meghan Markle to the CNN anchors. You see one or two bad tweets and you make that the narrative. You know, you can give me a break. You could go to anybody's X feed or Instagram feed or any feed and find one or two comments that are nasty or ignorant or what have you, and try to blow that up into your own personal narrative. I was attacked. I was under withering attack. That's like, okay, two people said something inappropriate. Grow up. And I guarantee you that's what he's doing there, because the left loves the narrative of it's only the racists who are responding to this hideous crime, and it's the racists who want to make this about black on white crime. The truth is, as you know, the vast majority of Americans watching these crimes, and there have been many of them over the past 5 to 10 years that we've seen on camera, are very reluctant to mention the races at all. Very few want to say, gee, I'm seeing a pattern of black people beating the hell out of white people, because I'm not a racist and I don't impugn behavior to the masses that I've seen from a few. That's the instinct of most Americans. But the truth is that the left injects race in so many of these crimes and instances that when it happens so obviously in the other direction, and they don't even cover the crime, they don't cover it by not mentioning the race, they don't cover it at all, of course we're going to stand up and say, gee, A, I see a pattern, and B, I see a pattern in your media behavior that compels me to point out the dynamic that you seem to be willfully omitting.
Yeah, it's not only true, as you say, that if 500,000 conservatives get together and one of them is wearing a swastika because he's a Nazi, that's the guy that's the guy in the picture. That is every single time. That is the guy in the picture. So they always do that and smear us in that way. But the other thing is this, and I think this is part of the intention, and it's part of the system, and it works really well for them, is that if you tell people they can't see what they see, you are encouraging racism, not snuffing it out. If you tell a woman that she shouldn't be more nervous when a black guy in a hoodie gets in an elevator with her than she is when a businessman in a suit gets in the elevator with her, eventually she is going to become a racist. She's going to say, well, I don't want to say this because everybody's going to yell at me, but I notice it's the black guys who make me afraid. This is the argument I have. Listen, I know people who are genuine bigots, and I sometimes say to them, I don't think you're seeing this right. And they say, I don't care. All I know is I've been mugged 3 times, and every time it was by a black guy. And I'm not going to be silenced about that. When you silence people, you make them angry, they stop thinking straight, and they start saying, things that can, in fact, be hateful. Listen, I once talked to a DA who was as left as far to be a prosecutor, who was as far left as is possible to be. And she sat there with me and she described what kind of crimes each race commits.
Surprised.
So, if you find a Jewish guy, he's going to commit if he's a criminal, he's going to commit a financial crime. A black guy is going to commit a street crime. And she went on, and she was talking about like Latvians. I mean, she had the whole thing laid out. that's just part of culture. That's the way culture works. It isolates people, and it isolates people according to the ways that people isolate themselves, which are race and money and class and all kinds of different things. And so that we're not supposed to mention this makes the racists, it gives the racists credibility. You know, when a Nick Fuentes comes out and says, oh, you know, nobody ever talks about the blacks, but the blacks do this and that. And people, I know young people, they sit and listen to him and go, you know, that's true. Nobody ever mentions that, but there's some truth to that. And it gives him credibility, which he doesn't deserve. If you let people speak openly and discuss things openly and stop calling them damn names every time they say something that doesn't adhere to your point of view, you will get to the truth eventually, or you'll get closer to it than we are now. Listen, the reason this moment is so important, and I don't mean in any way to minimize the actual crime of that beautiful young woman who's escaping from Ukraine of all places and gets killed on a light rail. I mean, I don't mean to minimize the details of that crime, but in terms of the bigger story, it is this fight that we are in, and this is a death fight because they don't want to lose this power. This is the power with which they have run the country for 50 years. This is the time when we are going to find out if we can take the narrative back because we're right. That's the reason. If we take it back because we're hateful, if we take it back because we're just angry, then I think we're going to lose it eventually, because that's not the way Americans want to live. But if we take it back because what we are saying is true, the guy did kill her because she was white, but more importantly, this is a much more likely crime to happen than the death of George Floyd, if the death of George Floyd was a crime at all. And so they absolutely manufactured nationwide riots around an anomaly, an exception to the rule, but they don't want us to point out that the rule is the rule and talk about those things that are indicative of how this country is run, how this country's culture fails people, and how the left has failed in building those cultures. That's what they're trying to escape. That's the power they're trying to hold on to, and that's the power we're trying to take away from them, because they shouldn't have it. They shouldn't have it. They're in the wrong. They're corrupt, and they have done great damage to this country, more damage by having the control of the media and the academies than in any other way. And that's why they hate Donald Trump so much, because he knows it and he does something about it.
Exactly right. So I'm looking at the update. Yesterday, we told the team no one had covered it. I mean, virtually nobody.
Zero.
It's not virtually. No one had covered it in the mainstream media at all. And now the update today, New York Times as of 4 p.m. Monday, nothing. NPR as of 4 p.m. Monday, nothing. CNN posted first article at 3 p.m. Monday. Washington Post reposted an Associated Press article at 5 p.m. The Associated Press posted nothing until 4 p.m. Monday. This all broke over the weekend. They had 48 hours by this point to get on the story. They wouldn't, because they viewed it as a Charlie Kirk story or a MAGA story. You have, on Monday morning, only CBS This Morning ran a story. Nothing from the Today Show, nothing from Good Morning America, not interested whatsoever. And then Politico drops an article which does not mention that the defendant is black and that Zarutska is white, and includes no photo of either the perpetrator or the victim, includes only a photo of Donald Trump. You cannot make this crap up. So and by the way, you don't have to be a journalist to understand that. I'm just going to get very frank with you about commercial incentives. When you have a girl this beautiful, this stunningly beautiful girl, in any other circumstance, Politico, AP, Washington Post, New York Times, all of them would be running a huge photograph of her, because beautiful people attract attention, whether they're victims or not. And they understand that the commercial incentive would be to stop and look at this person and say, what's going on around her? And for Politico not to include her picture, it tells us everything we need to know. They didn't want the narrative to be pushed out there that it's a white victim and a black perpetrator, because they believe that's going to somehow endanger black lives. That's what their take will be. Just like we've heard from people like at the New York Times and elsewhere that just discussing this kind of thing endangers black bodies, we've heard before. And so we have no choice but to drag them to the story kicking and screaming. I want to stay on CNN for 1 second. right before the weekend, this came up. They did an article. I pulled it. I didn't actually get to this, but I pulled this. Of course, CNN is very much against the ICE cleanup of the illegal problem created by Joe Biden. They think ICE are the bad guys, not the illegals that Tom Homan is arresting and deporting. And they did a piece ripping on Kristi Noem and DHS and ICE. And it is described as, these are the community pillars being detained by ICE. Well, I didn't get past the first pillar before my jaw dropped, Andrew. Milton Guamariga is known to many in Port Chester, New York as a family man, says CNN, who made a living as a marble installer and a volunteer with the local fire department. But that life was ripped away from the man earlier this month when U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers arrested him as he was leaving his home to go to work. He wanted to go to college and study IT. He had worked for 20 years as a local marble installer. He immigrated to the U.S. from Ecuador, but was uncertain how long ago. Okay, he immigrated illegally. He was here illegally. They make it sound like, he came over, right under the Statue of Liberty with an invitation. As it turns out, their pillar of the community was, DHS says, convicted not once, not twice, but 3 times of DWI, not even DUI, which is a little less alcohol in your system, but the full DWI. His criminal history, says DHS, includes 3 DWIs. This serial drunk driver is a public safety threat to innocent Americans. This is not a pillar. This is what CNN wants us to believe is a pillar, Andrew. And when you look at who wrote the story, and this is right on brand, the senior writer for CNN's Race and Equality team wrote it. The person's name is Nicole Terry Ellis. It's a woman, per her bio on the website. She joined CNN in November 2020. Much of her work focuses on the intersection. Already, you know where we're going, just the use of that word. Intersection of race and politics, education, health equity, and the advancement of women of color. She served as national correspondent for USA Today, that tells you a lot too, covering race, inequality, and activism. She led much of the newspaper's coverage of the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Rayshard Brooks, and the BLM protests that erupted across America, and so on and so forth. And this whole write-up is about how amazing all these illegals are that Tom Homan's getting rid of, these illegals who have committed other crimes because he's starting with the worst first. That's a pillar. 3 DWIs endangering your kids and mine, and God knows how many others, but we're supposed to hold on to him because I guess he then did some volunteer work for the fire department.
I'm very hard-boiled about this. You cannot just open the borders and let people come flooding in as they did. I mean, they now think there may be as many as 20 million illegal people. But then as we deport them, tell me one story at a time. Suddenly I have to look at this mass of people came over and I have to parse each one of them and find out what his personal story is. I want them all gone. I want every illegal out of the country. And I want them to self-deport if possible. I think that companies that hire them should be penalized. I want them gone. I want people. Immigration is a great thing in this country. It is part of this country. And one of the things I love about this country, I love that it's a multi-ethnic country. I am not one of these people who's afraid of black people coming over or anything like that, or some great replacement. I don't care who is here, as long as they come in legally and want this country and love this country. If they are willing to assimilate and become Americans, they're okay with me. That is my brother. But the fact that you open the border and let these people come marching in completely unvetted, and then when we want them to leave, you suddenly vet them. No, I'm sorry. That system doesn't work for me, because we're looking at England. This is one of the things, if you read about England in the left-wing press, what's happening in England, it's like, once again, these horrible MAGA people are trying to make a big deal out of England as if people were being arrested for mean tweets but let go for rape. That's what's happening in England. And it's happening because they let all these people, mostly from Muslim countries, come in, that they don't love Britain. They don't love the West. They want to transform Britain into a Muslim country. They treat women like garbage. And the women of Britain are now all unsafe. And they don't want us to notice that that's what will happen here. The only reason it hasn't happened here is we're a much, much bigger country and can absorb more people. Britain's the size of Oregon, so it's not going to be able to absorb the kinds of people, the numbers of people they've let in. And so I'm just been hardened about this. I just think, no, you let 20 million people come flooding in. I'm not going to look at each one of them going out. Get them out. That's what I want. I want people here legally. Yeah. On
the subject of crime, Trump just got a favorable ruling from the Supreme Court on the ICE raids out in California as we try to deport these illegals who are committing other crimes as well. So they had tried to stop it, and a lower court had ruled, well, you can't use, if you're trying to, find out where the illegals are, you can't consider their race. You can't consider the fact that they don't speak English when you're trying to figure out where to go find them. You can't consider that they work as a day laborer in like construction or agriculture. All of that is illegal to consider, which is just ridiculous. And they've been overruled now by the U.S. Supreme Court, who has said only Justice Kavanaugh issued a concurring opinion. It was an unsigned ruling. But he offered some rationale saying, no, you can consider all those things. It can't be the only thing. You can't be like, he's brown, I therefore suspect he's an illegal. But it can be part of the picture that you consider when coming to your conclusion. So that's a ruling in favor of sanity. And Trump now is starting illegal pickups in Illinois. He has reportedly sent some faction of ICE to Chicago and the surrounding area, though we're just getting initial reports. So that's different from sending the National Guard and even sending the National Guard in support of ICE. If what Trump cannot do is send the National Guard just period to go keep crime down. That he can't do without the invitation of a governor, which I've said. I love it because Gavin Newsom retweeted me saying it, and I stand by what I said. I'd love for Gavin Newsom to retweet the things I say about him. If he's that bold and he really is into MK commentary, go for it. Let's do that. I had a lot of messages for you. You should retweet some now that you really respect my opinion. Okay, but on the subject of crime and Gavin Newsom, in San Jose on Friday, there is surveillance video that we can show you of this car ramming into a jewelry store. Nearly 20 masked suspects swarm the store and ransack it. So you see for the listening audience, you see this car ram right through the glass front of the store. And here come the people. I mean, it's like a gang. Most are dressed in dark colors. They have masks on. You see an elderly man behind the counter trying to defend himself. He has absolutely no chance. They shove him to the ground. I mean, this is an 88-year-old. We later find out it's an 88-year-old. It's called San Jose. It's his San Jose jewelry store. And this is 2 p.m. in the middle of the day. So the man had a stroke as a result of all this. He was terrified. He was physically injured. And you've got the San Jose Democratic mayor coming out to say this is appalling. Watching the senior get assaulted made my blood boil. These people need to face the harshest possible consequences for their actions. And what did Gavin Newsom say? Nothing. We've seen him say absolutely nothing about it, Andrew. He did write on X on Saturday, the president of the United States is deploying the military into U.S. streets and using our troops like political pawns. Do not allow yourself to become numb to this. And that was the day he was tweeting about me, too. I'd love if he would tweet about the constituents in his own state and do something to try to protect them as our elderly and still part of the greatest generation is getting knocked to their, off their feet, cause strokes, losing their life savings and their life's work in the form of this jewelry store. Like when you have 20 criminals masked bursting into your jewelry stores in the middle of the day, you have a crime problem, Gavin. You should be thrilled to receive President Trump's offer of help. But instead, he's more worried about his political career.
This is, first of all, obviously the jeweler should be prosecuted for putting his store where those people were trying to drive. I think that would be California law, a perfect example of California law. But, this is another way that the left manipulates the culture in the most minute possible way, is by changing the language so that it doesn't represent the truth. They use terms like racial profiling. Racial profiling should be called police work. One of the things that police have, which is what makes them so useful to us, is they have experience. They can look at a situation and say, that guy over there is suspicious. They may get it wrong, but they have to have the right to go over and question that guy. I mean, this is how Giuliani and his police commissioners cleaned up the streets, and the New York Times went on an absolute rampage against what they called stop and frisk, which was stopping a guy who they thought had a gun, because they said it wasn't fair to black people. I thought it wasn't fair to black people illegally carrying guns. But, you talk to cops, and cops know when a guy is carrying a gun. They can tell by the way his clothes hang. They can tell by the way he walks. They can tell by all kinds of things, including what the guy looks like, which would include the color of his skin at times. This is the thing. If you had an app on your phone that could read criminal intent, if I could hold it up and it would show criminal intent, do you think the cop would be looking at the person? Do you think he'd be looking at the color of his skin? No, he'd be looking at the app. He's just trying to keep people safe, and he does that by using his experience, by using the fantastic app that is the human mind, and seeing where the crime is. By crippling the police and then going on to cripple the public by saying you cannot see what is happening in front of your eyes, you are handing over our cities to these criminals. And I have to say about Trump, I agree with you that Trump should not just go randomly sending the army into cities. That, I believe very strongly in federalism. I believe very strongly in local government. However, he's a very clever politician. And by sending ICE in there and having the city start to interfere with federal agents, he then acquires the right to send in the National Guard. On top of which, by having the leftist mayors of these high crime cities saying, no, we don't want soldiers coming in and cleaning up our streets like they did in the federal city of Washington, D.C., he's just showing you who the left is. The left is for the criminal over the victim. They are. That is just a fact. They support the criminal over the victim. They talk about due process. They don't give a rat's about due process. If they did, they wouldn't have prosecuted Donald Trump for all the things they prosecuted him for. They do not care about due process. They think the criminal has a point. They think he's making a statement. And when they talk about root causes of crime, and there is only one root cause of crime, which is the human heart, but when they talk about root causes of crime, what they're doing is they're convicting the society, and they're saying that the society is to blame for the criminals who are beleaguering it and hurting it. So every single person who gets attacked and arrested is basically an example of the society, where every criminal who does the crime is an example of the victim of society. Listen, no society is perfect. The fact that we have to say that means there are too many children walking around masquerading as adults. Of course, no society is perfect, but a society that stands up for victims is better than a society that stands up for criminals. I'm in favor, obviously, of paying attention to due process, but that's not a suicide pact. That doesn't mean we let people run rampage and beat up old people and rob their stores. Criminals should be punished as if they were criminals, because they are.
Let me get to this, because this ties it all together, both the immigration love on the left and the dishonest media and crime. Kristi Noem went on Face the Nation over the weekend to talk about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who the left absolutely loves. This is the so-called Maryland man, Maryland dad, who's allegedly been beating his wife, according to her, and is accused of trafficking a bunch of illegals. Kristi Noem's got a laundry list of crimes this guy has allegedly committed, and we just want to deport him. I mean, we'll prosecute him and put him in our jail eventually if he doesn't want to go, but he's going to go one way or the other. He's already been deported. They already deported him years ago, saying, get out. The only place you can't send him to is El Salvador. That's his only leg to stand on, because originally we sent him to El Salvador. Anyway, she goes on CBS Face the Nation, and here is what aired, SOT 20.
If he broke the law in this country, as the administration alleges, shouldn't he be held here and face charges here instead of being deported?
Well, prosecution decisions are always made by the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi's department, so we will let them do that, although this individual does have criminal charges pending. He has charges pending against him civilly as well, and the one thing that we will continue to do is to make sure that he doesn't walk free in the United States of America.
Okay, here's what she actually said. Listen to this.
This individual was a known human smuggler, a MS-13 gang member, an individual who was a wife beater, and someone who was so perverted that he solicited nude photos from minors. And even his fellow human traffickers told him to knock it off. He was so sick in what he was doing and how he was treating small children. So he needs to never be in the United States of America, and our administration is making sure we're doing all that we can to bring him to justice.
So that's CBS News whitewashing the allegations about a criminal defendant from the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. The same organization, well, the media in general, that wants you to believe the pillars of our society are being deported, guys with 3 DWIs under their belt. Andrew, it's shameful and it's truly actively dangerously misleading. People, they didn't hear her. People reading CNN think pillar and they don't know about the 3 DWIs, et cetera, necessarily. So your thoughts on the CBS machination?
Well, I mean, the most amazing part of that is that human traffickers, he was too mean and ugly and sinful for human traffickers. I mean, I thought that kind of stood out for me. When you're being criticized morally by human traffickers, you may in fact be a bad guy. And right, they can't put that in because that shows who they're supporting and it shows the underlying fallacy. I mean, look, these guys never say a nice word about any Republican, about Donald Trump, about anybody on the right side, but they got plenty of nice things to say about human traffickers and child molesters and criminals. It's sickening.
We'll finish it on the opposite end. I got to take a quick break. That cookie calling your name at 3 p.m., I just thought I was alone in that. It calls everybody's name? I mean, I didn't know that, but it definitely calls my name. I mean, yeah, loudly. The midnight fridge raids. All right, I'm not going to lie. I don't do that. But I do hear that cookie calling my name. The extra slice of pizza you swore you wouldn't eat. Okay, that too. I'm also subject to that. If you feel like your cravings control you, it's not just willpower. It could be your gut crying for help. That's your gut calling your name, not the cookie. That's why I want to tell you about Just Thrive Probiotic and their digestive bitters. See, modern diets often lack essential bitters compounds that manage appetite hormones like GLP-1, the same hormone in those expensive weight management shots. Just Thrive's digestive bitters give you the power of 12 clinically proven herbs that help your body break down food efficiently, while naturally supporting GLP-1 production. Controlled cravings, less bloat, steady energy, and comfortable digestion. Try Just Thrive Digestive Bitters and Just Thrive Probiotic today at justthrivehealth.com and use code Megyn for 20% off your first order. That's justthrivehealth.com, code Megyn. Your body is going to thank you. This fall on The Megyn Kelly Show, for the first time ever, we are going on the road. Megyn Kelly Live kicks off in October, and through 10 stops across the country, you will get the chance to join me for no BS, no agenda, and no fear live. It's an all-American tour with your favorite all-star guests. We've got Tucker, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Donald Trump Jr., and Eric, Piers Morgan, and more. Plus, your MK Media regulars, Maureen Callahan, Emily Jashinsky, Mark Halperin, Link Lauren, and we've got surprises in store for you too. So join me live and in person in Texas, Florida, New York, Georgia, California, and Arizona. Megyn Kelly Live, presented by Refi and SiriusXM. Go get tickets right now, megynkelly.com, before they sell out, and I'll see you soon. I wanted to round back just on the political angle of the situation down in Charlotte, because there is one. And, you know, CNN wants to report it, and the New York Times, when they finally got around to writing an article about this murder, made it all about, how the MAGA Republicans are seizing an opportunity. Like they're seizing an opportunity on crime, as opposed to, this is a terrible crime, and it's happening in too many places. I mean, there's a report just out today about this professor at Auburn University who was stabbed to death. Yes, once again, it was a white woman killed by a black man. It's not everywhere. It would be if the races were reversed. So, I mean, it's actually a problem, these crimes, as opposed to MAGA Republicans seizing opportunities. But here's what Trump posted on Truth Social about what happened in Charlotte. The blood of this innocent woman can literally be seen dripping from the killer's knife. And now her blood is on the hands of the Democrats who refuse to put bad people in jail, including former disgraced governor and wannabe Senator Roy Cooper. Now, Roy Cooper was the former Democratic senator of North Carolina, replaced by the current Democratic governor of North Carolina, Josh Stein. And Josh Stein is out there acting like he has absolutely nothing to do with North Carolina. I mean, he's the governor, and his predecessor had similar policies to his. I'll just read you part of what Josh Stein tweeted out. I'm heartbroken for the family of Irina Zaritska, who lost their loved one to this senseless act of violence, and I'm appalled by the footage of her murder. We need more cops on the beat to keep people safe. That's why my budget calls for more funding to hire more well-trained police officers. I call on the legislature to pass my law, etc. Let me just read you a couple of the responses. Megan Basham, who works where you work, over at the Daily Wire, great reporter, and she lives in Charlotte, responded as follows. Governor, your task force for racial equity in criminal justice specifically called for increasing pretrial release and decriminalizing public behavior, that's a term of art here, meaning homelessness and being a public nuisance. Both of these policies contributed to the defendant here, DeCarlo Brown, being on the streets and having the opportunity to commit murder on the Charlotte Light Rail. Are you going to roll back these policies that your racial task force initiated that are making North Carolinians unsafe? Here's Will Chamberlain from the Article 3 Project. He's been on this show multiple times. What on earth are you talking about, Governor? DeCarlos Brown was arrested 14 times. The police did their job. It's your job to sign into law bills that keep career criminals in jail. He was also, Josh Stein, Attorney General of North Carolina when this defendant was arrested and turned out by the criminal justice system 14 times. So no one in power in North Carolina is going to take responsibility for what happened to this guy. And I'm not going to let the police off the hook either. Because while the cops right now are being very critical of the governor, the mayor in particular, who seems like an absolute fool, here's what the police chief of Mecklenburg County, that's where Charlotte is in North Carolina, said in 2020. His name is Johnny Jennings, and said, quote, law enforcement in general is based on racism and that their department can, quote, probably slow down on discretionary arrests. And this is what's been happening in Mecklenburg County. Their criminal justice services has received millions of dollars to implement no cash bail, to decrease jail populations in an effort to address inequities. They've hired equity and inclusion consultants to address racial disparities at all levels of the justice system. And in 2020, the Charlotte City Council launched an initiative to reimagine policing, including diverting 911 calls away from the police department. I mean, this, it's really rich now to hear people like the governor, former attorney general, talk about how we need more cops. We can have all the cops in the world. Trump could send the entire Marines in there. But if the system, including the judges, we went over that yesterday, just send them right back out, no bail, no consequences, no penalties of any kind, we're not going to solve crime. We're going to have more Irinas get killed on the light rail system for no reason.
You know, to my mind, one of the proofs of the Christian doctrine of original sin is that people feel so sinful inside, they will do almost anything to prove their virtue. And one of the things they will do is they will live in a city that could be beautiful, that could be safe, and watch it just decline into chaos and filth and crime because somebody told them that that was the virtuous thing to do. It is not the virtuous thing to do. It is not kind to be good to criminals so that they can prey on ordinary citizens. It is a bad thing. And then it's as if people don't understand that crime goes up because of policy. That is what it is. It's political policy that makes your city crash, okay? It's not because some people are black and some people are white. It's because of the policies that are put in place. And then when things go wrong, they blame the police. And here's the thing that drives me crazy about this. You know, I worked in Hollywood for several years. And in Hollywood, if you have never done a nice thing for anybody, if you don't even call your mother on Sunday, but you pretend to be a cop on television, you can make $250,000 a week. You can make $250,000 a week. Real police who are actually doing the work of keeping people safe and risking their lives, they get paid considerably less, if you ask them, than $250,000 a week. Police are there to clean up the mess that politicians make, and then politicians blame the cops for the mess, and the press, like a poodle chasing after a red rubber dog, runs off after that. I mean, reporters are supposed to be cynical. When a politician points at a cop and says, oh, it's his fault, he's arresting black people, the reporter should immediately look to the end of that finger, to the end of the arm, and to the face that's pointing the finger, because that's the guy to blame. And this
the buck stops with you, sir.
The buck stops with the people who make the policies. And it's, the poor cops are the last guy. They're the last person on the totem pole. The policies were made up here, that it filters down and it becomes a punishing experience to live in a city because of those policies, and then they blame the cops. And it happens again and again, and it's just awful, because our police they're the thin blue line. They're the people who keep civilization. This is just something it's just appalling to me that people blame soldiers, they blame cops for the things that politicians do, and politicians could not be happier because they don't want to lose their jobs. But that's what's happening. That's why a city becomes unsafe. It becomes unsafe because of the policies. And the governor can point to the mayor. I think that's fair. But the mayor can also point to the governor, because he has a lot to do with what gets funded and what doesn't. So these are the people who should be held responsible. If you are walking out in your city and you are afraid, it's the responsibility of the politicians running that city, and it's the responsibility of the party of the politicians, because they are dictating some of the policies. And, listen, I watched New York go down the drain because nobody would vote for a Republican. I saw San Francisco go down the drain because nobody would vote for a Republican, because the Democrats had convinced them that it was not a virtuous thing to do to vote for a Republican. The minute they voted for Giuliani, as the New York Times cursed him every single day, he transformed a hellhole into a paradise. And that can be done through policy. It's amazing what policy can accomplish.
Let's go, North Carolina. You have a lot of roots in being a red state. If you would get back to that, you would be safer. I mean, it's just, and by the way, the New York Times, I pulled it up. Here's the headline when they finally got around to reporting it. A gruesome murder in North Carolina ignites a firestorm on the right. That's the story.
Republicans pounce.
Republicans pounce. Yeah. Security footage capturing the unprovoked stabbing in Charlotte became an accelerant for conservative arguments about the perceived failings of Democratic policies. It's really unbelievable. I mean, it's like you couldn't ask for better on their headlines. And for what it's worth, though, I will say that the police union in Charlotte is doing a great job, and they are sparing no one, especially not that mayor, saying if you would just look at anything we've been begging you to do over the past couple of years, this might not have happened. Please spare us on we have to address root cause discussion right now. So off. All right, let's keep going, because I've got to get to the Piers Morgan thing. So he had on someone describing themselves as a journalist named Lori Penny. And it was a panel involving the trans issue and the whole gender confusion. And he's got another panelist on there who is a male to female trans person. And then he's got this Lori Penny, who describes, I think, herself as non-binary. And Piers did something so simple and seemingly so obvious, but that you never see done, which was to turn to this person and say, what does that mean? And here's a sampling. I wish I could play you the whole segment, but we'd be here all day. Here's a sampling of what happened next.
The actual point of free speech is you have to tolerate and allow people to say things you don't like. That is the point of free speech. 100%. Unless you're actually inciting a crime, and nobody could have read that Graham Linehan tweet and not thought he was just cracking a rather crass joke.
I think a lot of
Talk about Graham Linehan.
No, if anything,
well, Blair's a trans woman. Why don't we let her answer?
I'm also a transgender.
I know.
Okay. Go ahead.
Which trans are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm non-binary.
I'm just curious what you mean by non-binary. What does that mean?
I'm curious. Firstly...
What are your pronouns?
They, them.
What does that mean? There's only one of you.
what does they, them, actually, they, them has been, the collective they has been used to refer to individual people for centuries and still is. So, I mean, if you don't understand basic grammar, that's on you. But I think you do.
I don't understand. I've got to be honest with you. I don't understand the concept of what non-binary means, or why you would use a plural pronoun to describe a singular person. That makes sense. To me, this is the problem with the whole woke thing. Is it's inexplicable. Nobody really knows what it means. I don't know what you mean by non-binary they, them. There's one of you sitting here, and you look to me female. You're a female?
Okay.
Are you a female?
If you don't understand what non-binary means...
Are you a female?
If you don't understand what non-binary means...
I don't.
Then I'm not sure you're in a position to lead a debate.
So just tell me.
Tell me.
But if you can't explain it in simple language, then
what is it?
What's the point?
Well, explain what non-binary is.
I can tell you exactly what being a transsexual is.
It means that my gender identity is something other than man or woman. I'm a non-binary individual.
But you accept you're a female?
I don't think that I'm here to discuss the contents of my...
You raised this whole thing. I didn't mention anything about what you were. You did. You said, I'm trans.
This has really become uncomfortably personal.
Has it? You said it, not me.
If you think this is uncomfortably personal, try undressing in a locker room with a 6'4" naked man.
Riley Gaines at the end there. It was amazing. It went on. Piers was so good. Like, just, what is it? What is it? I really doubt that this person even knows what it is, because why was she so reluctant to define it?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's like the third time I've watched that video. It's still cracking me up. It is amazing. It was one of Piers Morgan's greatest moments. But of course, this entire thing is an induced mental illness. That's what makes it so painful. You know, we pick on the trans people, and transgenderism is in fact a violent movement. I mean, if you work with my friend Matt Walsh, you know how much security he has to have for standing up against them. It is a violent movement because it's a non-real movement. It's a movement against reality, and reality has a way of dominating the culture. And so ultimately, you're going to have to fight if you don't want to live under reality. But the fact of it is, it's induced. It is induced by the left on mostly gay young people who don't know who they are, and they're confused and they're worried and they're afraid. And the left comes and tells them this lie and tells them, like Satan tells people, it tells them it's going to make them feel better and it's going to make them stronger to accept this lie instead of living in reality. And then we wind up blaming, again, we blame the transgender person. Sometimes they're to blame for the things that they do. They are responsible for themselves. But I think we got to clean these people out of our schools. We got to clean them out of our academies. We got to clean them out of like polite society, because you don't have the right to go around telling people that they should be crazy. You know, it's essentially like going on and telling people that everything's a conspiracy. You know, it's like, you can do it. You have the free speech right to do it, but you don't deserve any respect. And if you get sued for lying and lose, you should pay up. And I think that's who these people are. I mean, I've read some of these books about transgenderism to sort of get what they're talking about, and they're just not true. They're just like telling people that the world is not what it is. So I'm not surprised that this person identifies as something they can't even define, and the kind of self-righteous attitude they took, like, how dare you ask me what I mean when I say something, sir? You know, how dare you? Is comical, but it's only comical in the context of this greater tragedy of people talking confused young people into madness. And an induced mental illness is a truly evil thing. It means somebody has done an evil thing.
It's really amazing. It's like just something to behold. What is it? What does it mean? You've adopted it. You're living your whole life by it. You say it's your identity. Please explain it to me. And the absolute reluctance, and the only reason that would explain the reluctance is she doesn't know. She's too dumb to understand. That seemed obvious. Like, I think there's a world in which you could find somebody using that term where they would have a definition at the ready for you. She didn't know. She glommed on to some exciting, exotic term of the day to sound more interesting than she really is. And then when pressed, she resorted to, you're offensive. Piers was offensive for asking her what that means. I'm not familiar with that. And pretending she was being personally attacked by simply a question. What is that thing that you say, or is it actually just a thing of beauty? They were talking about Graham Linehan, who's an Irish citizen, was living in the UK. Now he lives in Arizona, who was on this show yesterday in his first exclusive on-camera interview about his ridiculous arrest for 3 totally benign, anodyne X posts on the trans issue for those of you who missed it, we have a little on what it's done to his life. Let's play that one, SOT 8. You not only did not have your colleagues stand by you, you lost your marriage, your health went downhill. I mean, I don't want to skip right over that, because when you invite this kind of stress and harassment, and I do use that word harassment as a legal matter, you've been legally harassed by these trans activists. It comes at a physical and personal cost that people too frequently gloss by. Can you speak to it a bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, the person I mentioned earlier, the sex offender, he released my home address online when I was still at the family home, which absolutely, terrified my wife. As the writer of Father Ted, I was fairly well liked, so neither of us thought we had to be careful with our online footprint. But of course, when it flipped and I became public enemy number one, all the things that we put online were kind of rifled through by trans activists for anything they could use against me. I've been visited by the police, I think, 3 times now, not including the arrest.
What?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They came to my home. It's just constant. I'm never not on edge in the country I moved to.
And sadly, Andrew, it's not just his country. I mean, we have now seen trans violence in mass shooting after mass shooting, a fact that the mainstream media will not report and would like buried. And I had Matt Walsh on last week after the shooting in Minneapolis, and we had a very frank discussion about where this is going and why no one will pay any attention to it. So what do you think is likely to happen now? Because I think the trans activists are on their heels. Their power's gone down. People are returning to sanity. But we still have, unfortunately, for example, the Supreme Court ruling in Bostock saying it's discriminatory to not hire somebody who says they're trans. This is really disturbing. Like, if you're running a school and you have somebody who says they're trans applying to you and you decide to reject them, you got a high likelihood of being sued by them, claiming that it's because they're trans. Like, you have some sort of a duty to hire trans people. And why would you, when you see these statistics and you see Graham's story and you understand that, just anecdotally, like what you said about Matt Walsh and this amount of security he needs just to go from A to B. Like, I'm deeply disturbed by this, and I really, really hope the Supreme Court revisits Bostock. But what do you see happening over the next year or two on this front?
Well, first of all, that was Neil Gorsuch's lowest moment, because, of course, if you're an originalist, you cannot believe that when people write about men and women and when they write about sex, they don't know what sex is. And again, going back to a previous point I made, clothing is a language. It's a language that we speak to one another. And there's a reason the Bible forbids people to cross-dress. I mean, it's because we believe that there's such a thing as men and women, and you should be able to dress in some style that indicates what you are. Here's what I think will happen. I always say reality has a voice, reality has a vote. So you can vote for transgender people, and the Supreme Court can vote for transgender people, but they don't really actually exist. You cannot move from one gender to another. There may be people who are, there's a very, very vanishingly small number of people who are more comfortable living as if they were the opposite sex. God love them, as long as they don't insist that I call them anything, or that they, as long as they don't go into the wrong restroom and bother people, fine. But for the rest of these people, these are people who have been induced. They have induced mental illness. But eventually reality will come back. People will understand that their children should not be told these things. They should be corrected. If somebody is gay, they let them be gay, but they're not going to, that doesn't change their sex. They're going to be who they are. All of those things are going to come back. And ultimately, there just won't be enough of them to have the kind of political weight that they've had. And I think that what will happen here.
We have to undo the laws state by state, though, right?
Yes,
because while we were quiet, they got all the blue states to change their laws when it comes to the educational front and what a teacher's allowed to do and the secrets being kept from parents and so on.
This is why you always have to speak up. This is why courage is required, and this is why courage is not a virtue in itself, but it's the bedrock of all other virtues. In this country, we have allowed the left to silence us, using our politeness, using our good manners to tell us that we were evil if we notice that crime is high in black neighborhoods, or if we notice that, gay people maybe are not as good for raising children as a straight married couple. All of these things we were told were impolite and were unvirtuous. And as I said before, before. People are desperate to appear virtuous to one another because we all know that we're sort of broken inside. And I think we have let them use that mechanism, and now it's time to make them stop. And I think we're just going to have to put up with the media calling us names and telling us what we are. You know, I lived in England for many years. Most of the 90s, I lived in England. And the first dinner party I was in England, somebody turned to me and said, "What is it with you Americans," in one of those plummy British accents that make you feel unintelligent, said, "What is it with you Americans that you had to write down your Constitution?" And I said, "It's so we don't forget," you know. And I think the problem in Britain is they have
really
such a long history. Yeah, exactly. Such a long history of knowing what freedom is in their bodies, that they preserved freedom even in times that are difficult. Now they've forgotten, and I bet they're sorry, a lot of them, that they don't have a First Amendment, because they have forgotten completely what free speech is, and that the author of Father Ted, a truly hilarious situation comedy, should be arrested for tweets while rapists are set free in Britain. It makes me worried that the country's not going to survive. It makes me worried that, you know, it's not going to be here when my children get to be my age. There's not going to be a Great Britain.
I know. I have the same thought, and same about a lot of Europe. I mean, Germany was shadow of its former self. Yeah. It's happening in France too. Okay. Last but not least, I want to get to the update on Cracker Barrel, which had this woke explosion and decided to change its logo. They decided the little guy, the like old-timey guy who was part of the logo, needed to go, and the barrel needed to go. And now there was no barrel, and it just said the words Cracker Barrel, and there was a revolt. And they started redoing all the restaurants in a way that completely sanitized them, made them totally antiseptic, like you were going to perform a surgery in there as opposed to go with your family for a good home-cooked kind of meal. And we had the CEO, a very annoying, obviously leftist woman with the huge glasses, and she's just totally on brand when you look at her. Her name is Julia Fels-Massino, trying to sell us the lie when she was trying to do like damage control and push her newness, that everybody loved the redesign. Okay, so they were forced, thanks to the right wing and President Trump, into reversing the logo decision, because the country rose up and said, we don't want this. No one wants this. Even some on the left said, we don't want this. So they were forced to reverse it and go back to the old logo. But they were continuing with the redesign. And this is from August 19th, that the CEO talking about the redesign is super popular. Watch this, SOT 24.
A lot of restaurants are leaning and going back to nostalgia, things that the customers are really comfortable with.
We never left it.
Yeah, you never left it, but you're changing up. You're kind of going a different direction. Why is that your strategy?
Yeah, because the Cracker Barrel needs to feel like the Cracker Barrel for today and for tomorrow. And again, the things that you love are still there. We need people to choose us, and we want people to choose us because people love this brand.
What if all the customers are coming at you hard enough about the look of the restaurant and they want to go back to the old way? Would you do it?
Honestly, the feedback's been overwhelmingly positive that people like what we're doing.
Yeah, people love it. They love it. And yet today at 10:36 this morning, we get the following announcement from Cracker Barrel. You've shared your voices in recent weeks, not just on our logo, but also on our restaurants. We're continuing to listen. Today, we are suspending our remodels. If your restaurant has not been remodeled, you don't need to worry. It won't be. Wait, what do you mean? Julie, you told me everybody wants to be remodeled. You said that's the number one request you're getting. They want the remodel. Now it's, if your restaurant hasn't already been remodeled, you don't need to worry. It won't be. With our recent announcement that our old-timer logo will remain, along with our bigger focus in the kitchen and on your plate, we hope today's step reinforces that we hear you. Okay. This has been such an amazing public beatdown that has completely brought Cracker Barrel to its knees. I love every minute of it. I'll say this. Robbie Starbuck, who's great. He's like very important. He's like of the Chris Rufo like level of importance in fighting wokeness in our American corporations. He interviewed the original Cracker Barrel co-founder, Tommy Lowe, who's an elderly man, on what this board has been doing at Cracker Barrel. And here's a bit of that from Robbie's show on Monday, SOT 25.
Before they hired the CEO we got now, they had board members that were from big corporations that owned stock, and they appointed one of those members of theirs on the Cracker Barrel board, and that complied to board, but they didn't have any idea what Cracker Barrel was. They still don't.
Yeah.
And evidently, they just yes people that are taking orders from somebody, and they don't know, and obviously the lady that's CEO doesn't know.
Yeah.
And
doesn't seem to care either.
No. Well, why would you? Got $7 million for doing nothing
a year?
Yeah.
He gets it. She doesn't get it. The big glass liberal lady was wrong on every front. So here's my question to you. Where's the accountability? Why aren't we getting an announcement that Julie Fells-Massino is out? The same thing happened at Bud Light. Remember, they quietly, after a huge kerfuffle, like moved that lunatic PR woman or marketing woman off the post. But the CEO stayed. There's no accountability. It's just like quietly skulking back to the original, hoping nobody noticed your folly.
You know, my favorite thing about this story is the media reaction was universal. It was just one media reaction, was this: oh, those silly right-wingers, all they care about is some stupid chain restaurant and their logo. How silly they are. This is David French, from David French in the New York Times, to a show I know you and I both love, The Fifth Column, where they suffer from, they're wonderful, but they suffer from a little bit of elitism. Oh, how silly is Chris Rufo. Oh, who silly is Robbie Starbuck. So I, on my show, said, okay, well, let's turn this around. Let's change some of their cultural, icons. Let's take the show Will and Grace and we reboot. This is the show that the left says helped normalize homosexuality in America. Let's reboot it and have Will become a Catholic and have the entire show be about Will struggling not to indulge his physical desires so that he can serve his God. That's what the comedy will be about, and that'll be the source of the comedy. Let's rewrite roots, so that the white guy doesn't charge into the African interior, which didn't happen, but does what he did in real life. He sits in his boat offshore until the black African brings his black slaves to give to him to take to America. Let's change all of their stuff. Recently they had Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ Superstar played by a black woman, and that who would ever complain about such a thing? And I thought, but if you have a hearing actor play a deaf character, that's a sin. So I thought we should just have a deaf Jew play Jesus Christ, and when they say you should be a black woman, he can say, I can't hear you, I'm sorry, I'm deaf. If we made any of these changes to left-wing culture, I mean, the New York Times would simply burst into flames. It would just actually turn to ashes, which would improve the state of journalism in the country, but not be very pleasant for them. These are the things that have to be fought over. I know it's sometimes silly. I know it seems sometimes petty. But no, if you have a thing, as Robbie pointed out repeatedly, this was not just about their logo. They were practicing DEI policies, which are racist. They were practicing, LGBTQ support, which was not something that a lot of their customers favored. So basically, they were taking money from people to use that money for things that their customers found contemptible. And yes, you're right, Megyn. You should be punished for that. You should be fired for doing something stupid like that and trying to impose it. Disney, the same way. When you've got people trying to, queer the children using Disney cartoons, you are violating the promise that company made when it was started and what Walt Disney stood for and what the company stood for. Listen, I may sometimes be on the other side of some of these questions. I may sometimes be more liberal than other people, but I do believe that capitalism is not just about, we're making enough money. It's also about serving the people. And if you're going to go out and say we're a company and we have rights like we're individuals, which companies do say when they go to court, then you have to behave with some kind of moral responsibility to the people you serve. This thing, I think that Chris Rufo and Robbie Starbuck are doing the work of God. I think that's great that they are holding these people to account. I think and they shouldn't allow themselves to be mocked. They can be mocked, but they shouldn't step down just because people are making fun of them. They're making fun of them because they get them where it hurts.
Yeah, and so far they show zero chance of being shamed out of doing what they're doing.
They're not easily cowed. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Well, in any event, enjoy your Cracker Barrel because it's going to stay the same as we suspected. That woman's lies were lies. They did not want the remodel. No one wanted the remodel. It was a woke leftist idea to sanitize a place that a lot of Americans love just as it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. Change for the sake of change is not always a good idea. Old-timey is actually really inviting and comforting. And there's something to it because there are fewer and fewer examples of it. And I say right on for the decision that they were forced now to make. Andrew, a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here. And we'll see you soon on the road.
Always great to see you, Megyn. Thanks.
Awesome. Okay. Don't forget, Go to MegynKelly.com if you want to get tickets for our Megyn Kelly Live tour. And you can see Andrew and the rest of our Daily Wire pals, among other wonderful Megyn Kelly guests. Okay, up next, Kevin Hines actually jumped off of the Golden Gate Bridge. He's here with his powerful story, and we'll explain why. If you are stressed about back taxes, maybe you missed that April deadline or your books are a mess, don't wait. The IRS is cracking down. Penalties add up fast, 5% per month, up to 25% just for not filing. But there is help. Tax Network USA can take the burden off your shoulders and stop the spiral before it gets worse. They have helped thousands of Americans, whether you're an employee, a small business owner, or haven't filed in years. Messy books? It's not a problem. They've seen it all. Tax Network USA has direct access to powerful IRS programs and expert negotiators on your side. You'll get a free consultation, and if you qualify, they may even be able to reduce or eliminate what you owe. More importantly, they will help protect you from wage garnishments or bank levies. So don't wait for the next IRS letter. Call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Megyn to speak to a real expert at Tax Network USA. Take the pressure off. Let Tax Network USA handle your tax issues. Want to know about something positive and upbeat? Well, I've been telling you about Firecracker Farm Hot Salt. It's been a showstopper gift and must-have item for anyone that enjoys spicing up their food. But what exactly is hot salt? Well, it's sea salt infused with a blend of hot pepper that's made by a wonderful little family company. It comes in sleek stainless steel push grinders that feel great in hand and are really satisfying to use. Their motto is, everything's better with hot salt. And based on the reviews, customers are in full agreement. So give it a try. Go to firecracker.farm right now and use the code MK at checkout for a special discount. That's firecracker.farm, code MK. Get yourself some hot salt before it's all gone. You'll thank me. We're joined now by a man whose story has inspired millions around the world. At just 19 years old, Kevin Hines jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge, and against all odds, he actually survived. That moment came with instant regret, and it was the beginning of a new mission for Kevin, to spread hope, healing, and the message that life is always worth living. He's now a global mental health advocate whose motto is simple: be here tomorrow and every day after that. As we mark Suicide Prevention Week, we wanted to have Kevin on. He's out with a powerful new book called The Art of Wellness, helping people everywhere build resilience and mental fitness. Kevin, it's great to see you again. How are you?
Thank you, Megyn. It's always great to see you. I'm doing very well today. Appreciate it.
So for the audience members who don't know your story, let's just start with it, because you had some tough breaks during your childhood, and by the time you were 19, they'd caught up with you.
Yeah. As an infant, first and foremost, I was born in abject poverty, lived in and out of crack motels, birth parents both on drugs, and I was ripped away from that lack of a home and placed into foster care. In foster care, my brother and I, who was 10 months older than me, Irish twins, my brother and I both got bronchitis because of neglect in a foster home, and he died right next to me. So I was a survivor, if you could say, from the very beginning. I bounced around from home to home, but unlike my poor brother, Megyn, I got very, very lucky. The Hines family took me in and made me their son. They essentially saved my life, gave me hope, gave me a future. And growing up in the Hines home, I thought everything's going to be copacetic from here, smooth sailing. But at 17 and a half, I had a complete mental breakdown in front of 1,200 people in a theater show I was in. And I had to be sent straight to see a psychiatrist, placed on medications. But Megyn, I was 17. I wasn't accurately following a treatment plan or adequately. I wasn't in belief that I had what they told me I had, called bipolar disorder, the very same brain disease both of my biological parents had been diagnosed before they ever took drugs. And by 19 years of age, my brain had crumbled under the weight of the pain I was experiencing. I call it brain pain instead of mental health. Your brain is an organ just like every other organ in the body, and it too can become diseased, and mine was. And at 19, looking seemingly at what I thought was the greatest pain I'd ever experienced, and what I believed to be the fact that it would never go away, I found myself at the Golden Gate Bridge walkway, peering over the rail, crying my tears to the waters below. And Megyn, as you well know, I jumped. And I fell that day 220 feet, 25 stories, closing in on terminal velocity in 4 seconds. In those 4 seconds, Megyn, the only thing I did was pray to God that I would live. As you said, it was an instantaneous regret for my actions and this 100% recognition that I just made the greatest mistake of my life, and it was likely too late. And people have asked me over time, how too late? Well, 99.9% of the people that had leapt off the Golden Gate Bridge since its inception 90 some years ago, it's been too late. They're all gone. And so I always say, I get to be here. And I firmly and formidably believe that getting to be here is both a privilege and a gift, no matter the pain you might be in. And I'm in a great deal of physical pain today and every day from what I did to myself all those years ago.
You broke multiple bones, your vertebrae were shattered, multiple internal organs were severely damaged. And yet I know you feel like you had a guardian angel, that you actually did have somebody looking out for you that day. Explain.
When I went into the water and I went down, well, first of all, when you hit the water, you hit it 15,000 pounds of pressure. That's like a giant African elephant standing on your chest. Who survives that? I imploded my T12, L1, L2. They splintered. I missed severing my spinal cord by 2 millimeters, 2 millimeters away from certain death and drowning. I went down 40 to 50 feet and I opened my eyes and I was drowning and I didn't want to. I desperately wanted to live fight or flight mode and I was fighting. I made my way to the surface, but I couldn't stay above water. I kept going down. I go down one more time. I can't make it back up. And I think to myself, this is it. This is where I go. I'm going to die here. No one's going to know I didn't want to. No one is going to know. I knew I made a mistake. And that's when something very large and very slimy and very alive began circling beneath me. And I remember thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. I didn't die jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge and a shark is going to devour me. Perfect. And it turned out to be no shark at all. Bystanders who saw me go over the rail would later report to the Coast Guard that a sea lion was keeping me afloat until the Coast Guard boat arrived behind me. And Megyn, you can call that whatever you want. But in my opinion, that is a miracle beyond belief. And God was looking out for me that day and made sure I was not going to die by suicide in a place that is 99.9% fatal for people who did the same thing I did.
That's incredible. It gives me the chills whenever I hear you tell this story, Kevin. Since then, you've worked tirelessly to stop others from making that same decision you made that day. You've been instrumental in getting, just for one example, the nets that we saw go up in 2023 under the Golden Gate, which many in San Francisco didn't want because they thought they might be unsightly, they might mar the bridge, but they've actually saved lives. Now it's a lot harder to die by suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate. It's something you had to work very hard to push for.
We worked for 20 years to raise the nets at the Golden Gate Bridge. The Bridge Rail Foundation, founded by my father, Patrick, Paul Muller, and Dave Hall, my wife and I were co-founding board members. We argued with the Bridge District for 20 years to do this, to stop suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge effectively. And the Golden Gate Bridge District's authorities' original charter stated, this bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, will be safe for all who cross it. They failed their mission. And we were holding them accountable. And since the inception of the net, suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge have reduced by 73% in 1 year. That's incredible. Proving positive that reduction of access to lethal means absolutely saves lives. And we're working toward the goal of making it to zero suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge, and we hope to get there as soon as humanly possible.
The thing about suicide is it overwhelmingly affects young people. I mean, over 65 also commit suicide in very large numbers, but 10 to 34, it's the second biggest cause of death, 10 to 34. It's bullying, it's childhood trauma, and it's all sorts of things. And so a lot of parents, Kevin, do not want to discuss this because they don't even want the idea floated out there, right? Like in the universe. So what's your advice to them? Do they have to discuss it? If it's, let's say, you have a kid who's, you can tell they're dark or they're feeling depressed and they're not talking to you.
Parents, listen carefully. If you do not have the conversation of suicide prevention at the breakfast, lunch, and dinner table with your children, they are going to come across it themselves through media, through social media, through all kinds of avenues, through their friends, through their peers. You must have the conversation, and you must be bold enough to ask 3 very important questions when you have the inclination that your child is considering suicide, is likely depressed, is struggling with anxiety, or all of the above. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life? And do you have the means? But you don't start there. You start with, hey, I'm really worried about you. I love you with all of my heart. I'm going to ask you 3 direct questions. I want you to answer me with honest answers. You will not be in trouble. Nothing you say could be bad or derogatory. I am here for you because I love you. I've got your back, and I'm listening to understand, not to respond. Are you thinking of killing yourself? Have you made plans to take your life? And do you have the means? Get some more honest answer from youth than the question, are you thinking of suicide, because of the taboo on the word suicide, and a more honest answer than the question, are you thinking of self-harm, because by definition, self-harm is not suicide, it's self-harm, which can lead to suicide, but it's not suicide. Asking those 3 direct questions are proven by the crisis text line's 20-year-old AI algorithm to get more honest answers than those questions I posed, suicide and harm. So asking the questions are pertinent, they're crucial, they're imperative, and they save lives.
Wow. And it's not just with your kids either. I know you encourage people, if they know somebody in their professional life and if they know somebody in their social life, if they happen to see somebody who is literally on the verge of taking their own life, like happened to you, to not be afraid to express caring, compassion, or ask the tough question. Like there actually was a woman you encountered on that bridge moments before you went over the side.
She approached me with a smile on her face, Megyn, and I thought she was coming to ask me if I was okay. I prepared myself. I was going to tell her everything and beg her to save me because I couldn't save myself. And she approached, she pulled out a digital camera, and she said, "Will you take my picture?" in that accent. And maybe she was trying to reach me in her own way, but I couldn't see it. When she left, I told myself the greatest lie any of us have ever told. Absolutely no one cares. And it was the furthest thing from the truth. Megyn, when I travel around the world to speak in every continent, with every language, to every community, one of the most common themes I hear is that people who are in the audience, especially youth alike, are being neglected and abused at home, or their peers are telling them to just go kill themselves in school and when they go home on social media. We must stop the inherent bullying, hazing, teasing, and harassment that goes on in our schools. And if we can't stop the bullying, we need to build more resilient children to let them know that suicide is never, ever the solution to their problem. It is the problem. Suicidal ideations are the greatest liars we know. Don't listen to them. And suicide does not, cannot, and will not ever take the pain away. It just transfers it on to everyone left behind and makes it wholly impossible for things to ever get better. But with time, energy, effort, and a great deal of hard work, things will always get better. I promise you. I know this. I'm living proof. That's why I wrote the book, The Art of Wellness, How to Find, Live, and Stay Mentally Fit. It is a workbook that determines how you better balance your brain, mind, behavioral, physical, spiritual, social health, and well-being. It is changing lives around the world, and I wanted to change your audience's lives here every day going forward, because you go back to the book, every day you have a problem, and you find a new technique to implement into your daily life to change your brain, to change your life.
Mm-hmm. To rewire that. And it's not like you had a lot of pain, and I know you do to this day as a result of your catastrophic fall, but you manage it. So you understand what pain is like. You understand what physical pain is like, what mental and emotional pain is like. You speak firsthand on these issues. And I want to tell this story. I've been wanting to tell you this story for years. So you came on my show on NBC, and your beautiful wife, Margie, was there too. And you told this story, and it was completely riveting. I mean, everybody listened. You could hear a pin drop in the studio, including me. And when we went to break and I was walking you out of the studio, you told me that you had like a policy that you asked people for their phone numbers, and you wanted people to make sure that if they ever like had a dark moment, to know that they could call you, that you would help them in their down moment. And I, listening to that story and listening to the ongoing pain you said you were in, said, Kevin, I want to give you my phone number. So you can call me. I can be one of your people if you ever, have these dark moments again. So I gave you my phone number, thinking I would be there for you. And not long after that, I got fired from my show. I left NBC. I was all over every newspaper in the country being called a racist and a terrible person. My career, for which I'd worked so hard, was in tatters. I was extremely dejected and in despair. And while I wasn't suicidal, I was about as low as I've been as an adult in terms of my wellness and my happiness. And you called me. You called me. I was thinking, I'm this hotshot news anchor. I'll help Kevin if he ever goes down again. And you contacted me and said, we're thinking about you and Margie. Is there anything we can do for you? We've got your back. We love you. We don't believe what we're seeing. And it was one of the kindest acts anyone has ever done for me. Honestly, I was always your fan, but in that moment, I just thought this small deed means more to me than any large act of kindness or gift that I've received in decades. And that's why you and she are at the top for me when it comes to people who have made a difference in my life. And we've kept in touch ever since.
Wow, man, I had no idea it had that kind of an impact. I saw what you were going through. I felt it was unfair, and I wanted to reach out. I mean, look, I'm mixed race. I'm part black, and you had me on your show. What they claimed you were doing and did was nonsense, and you're an incredibly beautiful human being. You've got a wonderful family, and you're just a gem out there fighting the good fight and doing good work and sharing your messages across the globe. And we wanted you to know that we appreciate you and it. And here's the bottom line. When I said this earlier in the show, I get to be here. I get to walk this green earth every day. Every waking moment I experience this life and the people I meet, the places I go, the things that I do is a gift that I otherwise would not have had I died off the Golden Gate Bridge. So for 25 years, because I don't know if you know this, but September 25th is the 25th anniversary of my living from the Golden Gate Bridge. And I couldn't be more grateful for every waking second, every waking millisecond. We're doing something really exciting, Megyn. We're making a film called The Toll, about the toll suicides at the Golden Gate Bridge have taken on the Bridge Patrol, the Bridge District themselves, because they've seen some hardship, the Coast Guard, who all have PTSD from the bodies below the bridge that don't get proper services because they're not combat veterans. And all the iron workers that experience suicides while building the net in person. So all of these things are coming together, and it's the toll that suicide takes on the larger community, and the toll that easy access to lethal means like opioids and fentanyl take on the larger community in San Francisco. We are covering all these topics in this film. It's going to be incredible, and I'm really excited because Robin Williams' son, Zach Williams, is my co-producer, and it's truly going to be something to behold when this film comes out, and something very special that reduces suicides globally and that we share with the world, that we know will be a catalyst to reducing access to lethal means, not just at the Golden Gate Bridge, but around the world where suicides are a hotspot and where people die. We're now working with Niagara.
We'll post it on all of our socials, Kevin, when it hits. And in the meantime, support Kevin by buying The Art of Wellness. Find out more about his story at KevinHinesStory.com. God love you. God bless you. Love to Margie too. Thanks for being here, Kevin. What a man. We're back tomorrow. See you then.